as I talk in this way, I'm going to start talking in a more direct way. The point, I can just feel it. The point will be more to lead you to an experience in yourself. So if anyone listening to this starts to just feel that, or feel something light up and go, oh yeah, I resonate. I know what that is. I forgot about that. It's here. If you get that experience, like just let it take you. It's okay. You don't have to listen to every word I'm saying or anything like that. But these are pointers into your own direct experience in a deep way, right? That's the idea. And the first one is, be willing to let go or at least question your own narrative, right? Sometimes I use the analogy of time, right? In this moment, can we actually experience time outside of this moment? Well, no. We can remember something that happened 5 minutes ago. I can remember something that happened 10 minutes ago, 1 day ago, 10 years ago. Does that change anything about this moment right here to have that memory just move through the mind? Not at all. You don't go back there. You don't go back to something called the past. You've never existed in the past. You've never existed in the past. And similarly, you can imagine the future. I can imagine I'm going to turn into a gorilla in 10 minutes. I can imagine in 2 days I'm going to be taking a walk on the beach. I can imagine any number of things, silly, absurd, or things I believe are going to actually happen, but I've never touched the future because all we have is presence. When you really notice that the past and the future are completely thought-based, then we can sort of set them aside for a moment. And then where are we? Well, whatever's right here, that's where we are. And all of a sudden, I don't have to concern myself so much with where did I come from? Where am I going? What are my qualities? What are my deficits? What are my achievements? What are my goals? How nice to just set that aside for a moment and recognize, wow, there's actually something here. I don't even have to give it a label. I don't have to say it's me or this or the world or the universe. What if I just don't even give it a label at all? Because those labels are kind of thoughts as well. And yet, here it is. There's something very much alive right here. There's something very poignant, very clear right here that needs no past to confirm it. It needs no future to confirm it. It needs no narrative to confirm it at all, right? So there's something here that almost everyone with just a simple pointing like that can contact at least a little bit, even if it's just a taste, that shows you, actually, there's something here that doesn't need a narrative. It doesn't have a narrative that's not bound to or defined by any narrative at all. The narratives can be here or not, and this doesn't change. This presence does not change. It's rather poignant. That's what I mean by be willing to let go of the narrative. Now, you may do it through a practice like I just did. You may just sort of get really curious. Well, wait a minute. Well, what is here then if there's no past or future outside of thought? But just be open to it. Be open to the possibility that something beyond your own personal narrative, or more primary to your own personal narrative, even though you can't define it because you have to use thoughts to define it, is actually rather real. It may be the only thing that's ever been going on, really, in your experience. Because what is a thought without this clear present moment in which it appears? Nothing, right? So this is the first step, or the first pointer I made there. The second one is let go of your spiritual identity. So what often happens is we come from a life where we're, chasing the goals that we just inherited maybe from our parents or from society, or worse, from competition. We don't even realize, like, I'm just competing with my friends and neighbors without even knowing that's what I'm doing. I don't even know what I want, right? So then we start to dig in and we start to, really go, well, wait a minute, what do I want? And then we find out about awakening, or we get a spiritual sense, or we have a mystical experience. We do it maybe on ayahuasca or something. And all of a sudden we're like, that's what I really want. That's what I really, really want. That's what's real to me. That's what's important to me. And of course it is. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with attuning to something far deeper than the superficial sort of things we've been chasing around that we didn't even take time to decide whether we wanted. So now we have this sort of spiritual orientation, which is really wonderful. But it comes with side effects. And one of the side effects is we're going to apply the same past and future to it. We're going to still try to turn it into thoughts somehow. We don't really do it. It just happens. But we'll get entangled in the thoughts of like, oh, well, what's going to happen when I'm enlightened? And, where's it going to lead me? And what's it going to give me? And wait a minute, these are just more future thoughts. They're just spiritualized. Or the past, oh, when I had that awakening, it was so powerful. And if I could reproduce that again, wait a minute, that's another thought, right? It's another past thought. And again, we find ourselves right here in this vast mystery that's essentially eternal. Eternal means not in time, not subject to time, right? So just like we learn to let go of more mundane narratives, we can let go of spiritual narratives. And the presence that is the process, that is this portal that carries us deeper into presence, is always here. And so that's what happens there, is we just sort of recognize, oh, okay, I've sort of spiritualized my seeking mechanism in my mind, or my ego, or my judgment, or whatever it is. So that was number 2 in the video. Now, the third part is when I talk about being one-pointed. One-pointed is when one-pointed is an approach, but I will say it kind of meets you. I don't think you can force it onto your experience necessarily, but at some point it'll just make sense that there's a question or a curiosity that burns so hot that all of your energy and attention just start going into it. And to bring it forward from the 2 previous analogies I made, or the 2 previous points I made about the narrative and then the spiritual narrative or spiritual identity, when we clear those thoughts, when we just set them aside for a moment, the past and the future and the spiritual identity and all of it, again, there's this presence. But the more we come into contact with this presence, this real, eternal, ineffable, indescribable, mysterious presence, we actually get really curious about its nature. It'll happen more and more. You'll just be like, well, what is it? Or what am I? If there's this presence here, and those thoughts were about what I think my past is, my future, and all that, but I don't disappear when those thoughts aren't there for a moment. So then what am I? Like, am I this? Am I the presence, or what? And so something will get our curiosity. Something will start to make us feel like, huh. And often we'll have these experiences where, as we dig into this, as we dig into identity, as we start listening to this kind of, these kind of talks or doing these practices, we'll start to get these little tastes here and there. But what often happens at first is they're fleeting. We'll get a taste, and then the next day it's like, I feel more tight. I feel more constricted. Like, where did it go? It was here. It is here. It's got to be here. That's what it felt like in the moment. So why is it all of a sudden seeming to not be here right now? Right. And so that fluctuation that starts to happen often, which can be rather frustrating when it's not, and it can be rather amazing when it is. It's like this, like, wait, what's going on? So that even increases the curiosity. Well, wait a minute. Which part's real? Is the presence real? It sure seems like it. So what's making it seem to come and go? I know it can't come and go, but something does, So that sort of drives our curiosity into this one-pointed approach. The one point is awakening. The one point is saying, whatever this is, there's something here that I'm not fully getting. Like, I know I can see through the illusions now. I can see through the narratives, the thoughts. I have moments of deep peace and clarity, and yet something's still holding on. What is it? What am I? It may be, is it me? Is it the illusory self separate from the world? Is that what keeps grabbing on, or is it thoughts? So we get more and more curious until that curiosity kind of comes down into like one point. And I can't tell you exactly what that point is by definition, but I can tell you in my own experience what it felt like when it happened for me. This was years ago, but it all of a sudden just felt like there was something here that I had tasted periodically before, but now I realized very clearly that it's actually always here. It's always accessible. And it's the most interesting thing I've ever come into contact with, because it is beyond all of this. It is beyond all of the ways my mind is putting reality together as separate. Like, I'm this little, distinct entity here. Everything out there potentially could harm me. Like, that whole analogy that my mind was believing, or that whole paradigm my mind was believing, I could tell that wasn't nearly as real as this thing I was experiencing, but I couldn't say what it was, but I didn't need to. So the one-pointed approach for me was just like keeping my attention on it, keeping my attention on that which is not the thoughts, not the narratives, but it's darn well here. And it became one-pointed, like it was like almost on fire. It felt so compelling and so fascinating. And I was still able to move through life. I was going to work. I was doing the things I would normally do, but there was this just building of this fascination with this possibility. And I felt more and more like I had the chance to give myself to it somehow, like to literally just let go into it. And so this is a process that built over time for me, but it became very obvious. It was beyond me. I could tell it was beyond the scope of what I took myself to be. That's what I would call a one-pointed approach. And you can help it along. You can also just listen to these kinds of pointings and feel it coming up through you over time. But the key is, or the lesson or the pointing is, when you start to experience it, give it your attention, give it your heart, give it all that curiosity that's been here for so long, and even the frustration, like all of it. It's just let that experience that's coming into your life, even though you can't say what it is, you don't necessarily need to give it any kind of label, but just give it your attention and let it show you what it is, and it will.